Now it gets even better. There is no U.S. Air Force at this time. There is, however, an Army Air Corps and Navy flyers, and they don't care for each other. Quote, naval aviators grumbled that the Army Air Forces handed out medals like after-dinner mints. Pilots of different services took satisfaction in buzzing a rival's airfield and aircraft, or, when on the ground, holding down their brakes while gunning their engines in order to blow clouds of dirt and dust onto their adversaries. Every major action early in the Pacific War, he writes, involved a dimension of inter-service rancor. End quote. When you have Douglas the Situation MacArthur in Australia, and Admiral Ernest King running the United States Navy, I've heard it said that he's the most powerful admiral that has ever run the United States Navy, you're going to have some sparks over, questions of things like strategy. MacArthur has a plan, and while the carriers are still smoking after Midway, he cables it to Washington, D.C. In typical MacArthur fashion, he's got his eyes on the prize. He's seeing the whole war laid out in front of him like a vista. The surrender of Japan and everything. First step's going to be the taking of New Britain's famous harbor and airfields at Rabaul, which is part of the early stuff that happened in 1942. And he's going to do it in like 3 weeks, he says, which is insane. But that's the plan. And the way he's got the plan set up, this should surprise nobody, would set it up so that the Army's taking the lead, which of course means MacArthur would be running it and the Navy would be in a subsidiary role. But of course, conditions here in the Pacific with all the islands and water being what they are, MacArthur told Washington that he would need a division of troops trained in amphibious warfare, that's a way of saying Marines, and 2 aircraft carriers at a time when the United States only has 3 in the Pacific. And as we all know, within hours, I think, of the Battle of Midway, about a month after the Battle of the Coral Sea, when the admirals of the United States Navy are probably still in shock by how quickly you can go from having a nice set of carriers to having no carriers, right? A knife edge of like 15 minutes. The idea of handing over those carriers to a guy like Douglas MacArthur, to whom they will be just one of the spinning plates or juggling balls that he's managing to keep in his mind as he, sees his eyes on the prize of the eventual defeat of Japan and the return to the Philippines. Don't call it a comeback. Well, to them that looks like handing a precious glass family heirloom over to the klutzy forgetful child, or the ring of power, Gollum's precious, over to somebody that if he somehow were to lose the ring of power, his idea of what you do in that situation is ask the Navy for another one. Ernest King had already had a plan for this region that he'd been telling the president about for months. And his plan, this should shock nobody, was designed in a way that would mean the Navy was running it. And people like MacArthur and his army forces would be there to mop up and garrison things as the Marines and the Navy continued to jump forward, seeing the entire Pacific theater as their theater. As Admiral King pointed out over and over again, they gave you the Atlantic, right? You've got the European theater. Go have your army fun over there. This is a Navy operation. King is especially concerned with the Japanese airfield for seaplanes that is being built on the island of Tulagi, and he wants to go take that back right away, ASAP. And his problem is the Army is arguing with him over whether or not this is a decision to make and whether he can control it, even if he did that. This is the way describes the intensifying problems. And we should point out, there is a Joint Chiefs of Staff with all of the heads of the military